Since the triumph of slavery ending in the U.S., segregation became a new commonly tragic issue in public occasions, including schools. The tragedy of discrimination helped shape our nation by shedding light on one of the country's biggest problems. African Americans struggled to be treated fairly, but didn't develop hate towards the oppressors, and instead led nonviolent protest. Peaceful protest led to equality.
It is May 17th, 1954. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided to repeal the separate but equal law. Many states immediately started integrating schools, but many did not. Arkansas was one of those states. 1957. 3 years after the decision, Arkansas joined in on desegregation in schools. The first school to attempt integration was Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Central High School was a very prestigious school and was a good place to get a good education. So the 9 African American students selected to help end segregation in schools were very intelligent. These students also had outstanding attendance reports. The 9 students consisted of 3 boys and 6 girls. The students were Ernest Green, Elizabeth Eckford, Jefferson Thomas, Terrence Roberts, Carlotta Walls, Thelma Mothershed, Minnie Jean Brown, Gloria Ray, and Melba Patillo. At the time, the Arkansas governor was Orville Faubus. He was against desegregation and ordered the Arkansas National Guard to come help, quote, preserve the peace and avoid violence on the first day of school. September 4th, 1957. This is the first day of school at Central High for the African American students. The NAACP, or National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, helped aid rides to these students. The plan was to have Daisy Bates, the president of the Arkansas chapter of the NAACP, to drive the 9 students to school. But one student, Elizabeth Eckford, did not get that message. Eckford rode the public bus to school that morning. When she arrived, the mob of angry segretists were there and prepared for a fight. Even some church groups were there to protest. Anyone in the crowd that was supporting the students and had a job quickly lost their occupation. The National Guard was there just to keep the mob from killing her and to keep her out of the school. As Eckford made her way through the crowd, she was spat on, threatened, insulted, and pushed by the mob that attempted to keep her from the school. Once Eckford reached the doors, the soldiers guarding the door pointed their bayonets at her, forcing her back. Scared, she ran to the nearest bus bench as the mob followed, screaming after her taunts and threats such as 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to integrate, and lynch her. Lynch meaning hang. Eckford finally escaped after a white woman named Grace Lorch escorted her home safely on a public bus. As the other 8 students arrived, they were scared off and chased away by the mob as well. After the incident, President Dwight Eisenhower ordered Faubus to assist in desegregation and to support the students. Then, 16 days after the first day of school, on September 20th, Judge Ronald Davies forced Faubus to remove the soldiers. It had been decided that the Little Rock Nine would be protected and escorted to school by only the city police. September 23rd, 3 days later. A car suspected of holding the students pulled up to Central High. However, instead of 9 African American students getting out, 4 black reporters exited the vehicle. While the mob was distracted with the reporters, the Little Rock Nine were able to be safely and almost secretly escorted inside. However, one mob member noticed them sneak in and shouted to the crowd. Angry that the students were able to slip past, the segregatists then turned to the reporters and attacked. 3 of the reporters ran for it. However, the 4th reporter, Alex Wilson, kept walking. The mob easily kept up with him, and Wilson was continuously kicked, hit, slapped, and beaten. Wilson's nonviolence only provoked the crowd, and at one point he was hit over the head with a brick and collapsed. But after, he still stood back up and continued to walk slowly to his car to drive away. Unfortunately, Alex Wilson passed away due to his injuries. Later in the same day, the crowd broke the defensive line protecting the students inside Central High. The Little Rock Nine were trapped inside. One of the nine, Melba Patillo, recalled that I'd only been in school a couple of hours, and by this time it was apparent that the mob was just overrunning the school. We were trapped. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to die here in school. A couple of the kids, the black kids, that were with me were crying, and someone made the suggestion that if they allowed the mob to hang one kid, they could get the rest out. Luckily, no students died, and they were all able to get out safely that day. After that day, protests still occurred outside the school, but the 101st Airborne, sent in by President Eisenhower, helped maintain the public and prevent some violence. Inside the school, very few white students stood up for the Little Rock Nine. The soldiers that walked them through the halls couldn't physically or verbally fight any white that attacked a student, but could only keep them from being killed. The students were also insulted by the other white students, but the soldiers could not stop them. The Little Rock Nine also did not fight back, but simply went about their school day and tried to ignore the racist insults and threats. Only Minnie Jean Brown fought back. One day, Brown was at lunch when a fellow schoolgirl was taunting her. Minnie Jean had had enough of it and decided to dump her bowl of chili on the girl's head. The cafeteria workers that were African American applauded her actions. As a result, Minnie Jean Brown was suspended. Once again, Brown was being harassed and insulted the girl back with abusive language. Minnie Jean Brown was later expelled, which was good for the segregationist, but negative for the desegregationist. Despite the tragedy of expulsion, the triumph of graduation arose. Ernest Green was the first African American student to graduate from Little Rock Central High. Martin Luther King Jr. attended Green's graduation, but as Green walked across the stage and accepted his diploma, no one clapped. Peaceful protests during the Civil Rights Movement and the Little Rock Nine integration led to equality, equal education, and equal representation for all African Americans made them true accepted Americans.